Hi, everyone. I am Brian Koester, Senior Director of Government Affairs at NBAA. First, thank you for coming to NBAA-BACE 2025. Super excited to have you guys here. It's been a really fun week for me. I hope you guys enjoyed Dirk Bentley, Stuart Walton at the opening keynote. That was pretty special to have them up there and talking about their love of aircraft and their love of aviation and how business aviation has improved their lives. And so I have been working at NBAA for almost 15 years, and I've spent 10 of those years on a project focused on training. And these gentlemen over here have been a huge asset, them and their organizations, in that entire project. And so going down the line here, we have Toby Meyer, SVP of Flight Operations and Director of Ops at Executive Jet Management. We've got Dondi Pangalangan, SVP of Strategic Initiatives at Lacy. We've got Tom Benvenuto, SVP and DO for Solairus Aviation. And then we've got Tim Schoenauer, whose title just changed. He is Senior Director of Global Business Aviation Training Solutions at CAE.
I'm the only SPG not up here.
And then we've got Brian Small with FlightSafety, their Director of Government Affairs. These guys have been an absolute pleasure to work with. I can't say enough about how much they have given of themselves and their organization's time and treasure to support this project. Obviously, everything we do in aviation is focused on safety. How do we safely get from A to B? And these guys have recognized that safety is something that they shouldn't keep within themselves or within their organizations, and that it is important to give back to the community. A rising tide lifts all boats, and together we can achieve more. And so with that in mind, we have come together and we have worked on standardizing SOPs, so standard operating procedures. There's no great way of saying that, but common airplane SOPs. So this is a document that includes a universal way to operate fixed-wing airplanes, multi-engine, single pilot, multi-crew. These SOPs apply to all of them, and it's really been a 10-year endeavor to do that. So this represents the culmination of a years-long effort to improve safety, reflecting input from the largest 135 operators to the smallest Part 91 operators. Now with us today is Dave Keys, former chairman of the NBAA's Domestic Operations Committee. He's a two men in a truck, just two guys in a plane kind of operation. He put a lot of time and energy into this, making sure that not only will these SOPs work for these large organizations who operate fleets of aircraft across multiple types, but will it also work for someone without those additional resources? And so these guys have all come together. Getting everyone to agree on this has been no small feat. The common phrase that we use is, you ask 10 pilots for their opinion on SOPs, you'll get 11 opinions. And so that proved to be very true. There have been multiple iterations of SOPs through this 10-year process. And I'm going to bring up Brian Small in a little bit to talk about, where did those iterations come from, what happened to those, and how do we get to here. But I do want to take a second to point out not only that this will improve safety by hopefully through incentivizing adoption and implementation of best practices, that standardization ensures consistency in dynamic crew and staffing situations, and being able to ensure consistency for those operators who operate multiple fleet types. We think that'll have a big impact. And then the last thing we want to note is that with this standardization comes stronger data. So flight operations data, FOQA, and then now we have SOQA, the simulator operations quality assurance data. When everyone's operating the airplane or the aircraft in the same way, the data becomes a lot stronger and we can do a lot more with it. So that we're looking forward to the trickle-down benefits of some of that as well, and what that's going to lead to in the future. And the last thing I want to note on this is Rev 1. just like today's SOPs, all of you who have operating manuals in your organizations, you continue to iterate, you continue to improve. The idea is that this is not a fixed document, this is a living document. You'll note that on the website for this, there's actually a link on there already to provide feedback and input. We know there's no shortage of opinions on SOPs, so there's an avenue to have your opinion heard. We'll get into the details of sharing those opinions and how those will be reviewed a little bit later. But without further ado, I do want to bring up Brian Small to give us a little bit more background and detail on this process.
All right, thank you, Brian, and thank all of you for coming this afternoon. I know it's late in the day. It's been a busy week so far. First, I want to really thank NBAA for not only this convention annually, but for their advocacy for business aviation, and most importantly, for serving us as a custodian of the standardized operating procedures common for aircraft. I know that at FlightSafety, we take this to heart. We feel that a common airplane SOP is something that truly improves risk mitigation. It's a critical component of risk management in your cultures. It improves the safety of your flight operation. And that's whether you fly with someone all the time or whether you actually use contract people or contract pilots to support your operations. Or perhaps you use supplemental lift and you have an expectation of that operation that's out there. So really, kudos to NBAA for working through this effort and for these gentlemen on stage and others that have supported development over the course of the last 10 years, as Brian's been saying. One of the things that I wanted to point out is that the 2025 NBAA top safety focus areas are really lending themselves to the development and the use of a common SOP. So if you think about the things that NBAA has identified, like loss of control in flight, runway safety is a big one. We'll talk a little bit about that today. Human factors is a big item here. And then certainly what Brian said earlier, it's about that data sharing or safety data sharing that was not necessarily something that we have the ability to do just in a few years ago, but that capability has increased dramatically over time. So a lot of help goes into NBAA's efforts, and then we really think that adoption of this will be critical to your flight departments. I wanted to take a moment and talk about standardized curriculum a little bit. Just show of hands, people have heard standardized curriculum over the last couple of years, a few of you in here, okay. So thank you for that. Standardized curriculum was born in 2015 through a recommendation from the ACTARC. That initiative was really targeted towards finding a standardized method of training for our air carrier certificate holders, which many of you are. A lot of you are Part 91 operators. So for us as training providers, I know that Tim and I were always participating in that from the inception, along with many operators, manufacturers, and of course the regulators. One of the components of that was the requirement to develop a common SOP. And as Brian alluded to, that was not an easy task. We brought training providers, manufacturers, operators, regulators, and a subcommittee to be able to talk about this and work through what are those things that universally we could work through to make sure that we have a common standard. So that was the genesis of this. One of the things that's just of interesting note is that 2015 was also the same year that the NTSB Most Wanted referenced procedural compliance as one of those top 10 items. So we had a lot to talk about as we began to look at SOP and the impact that it has on all of our flight operations. So now I want to talk to you about training provider perspective a little bit. I think for us, and not to speak for Tim who's on stage here, but what you're witnessing really is an unprecedented collaboration. I mean, just a couple of years ago, CAE and FlightSafety would not necessarily be in the same room with each other, collaborating for safety endeavors, and other training providers as well, certainly, but not something that you would have seen before. And that change is significant. And the reason why I bring up standardized curriculum is that it was that effort that was started that actually brought us together. So it brought us together in kind of a larger group, We had subgroups where we spent a lot of time with Brian for the last 10 years working on that training project. But also it lent itself to developing other areas where we could work together for the greater good. Now, we certainly compete for your business, right? That's absolutely still a thing, and that's a good thing. You want us competing for your business because it sparks innovation and it gives you choice in training providers, so you want that. But I think what we've learned over the past couple of years is that there are two axioms that came out of this. Is number one, CAE, FlightSafety, the other training providers, we don't compete on safety. Okay, so we don't compete on safety. That's critical. It's a critical change. And I think the other thing that's important to know is, or what we found, I should say, is that working together for common industry safety goals makes us stronger. So when CAE speaks to the regulator about something, or FlightSafety speaks to the regulator about something, they're maybe getting different opinions. They're not seeing that the initiative, the concern is maybe something they want to address, but together, along with those other training providers, we can certainly help move that needle forward. And that's what this effort really entails. The graphic that you see up here is a perfect example of what things that both Tim and I were very concerned about as we work through the standardized curriculum is that effort was targeted towards air carrier, but what it left out and what we kept bringing the opinion of and trying to work through is that we need to be considerate of the Part 91 operator and the impact it'll have on them. As you can see, this is an example of our reservations that happen annually, and that the Part 91 operator is greater than 50% of those training objectives. Traditionally, the way that we have training programs approved is by developing to the air carrier program because there's guidance for that, right? The regulators can sink their teeth into something. They can say this equals that, therefore it's approved. What we haven't had is that same effort under the Part 91. So you guys are essentially getting an air carrier program, not necessarily targeted to the desires that you have for your training experience. But I know for CAE and for FlightSafety, we hear you. We want to conduct the type of training that you want us to conduct for you. And realistically, together, we've been able to kind of move that with the FAA. And I think that you'll see changes in both companies that will lend itself to the type of training that you guys have been looking for. So, looking at a common SOP versus airplane specific, we get this question a lot, right? As training providers, we have a very unique perspective on a world as far as procedural compliance, different flight operations, because we see these crews from all over coming through all the time. So what I want you to know is that the common SOP was not something designed to supplant OEM suggested procedure. It is about normal operations, okay? And where those normal operations touch against the manufacturer's procedure, we state as such, and we reference you to that documentation. So it does not supplant the OEM procedure. It supports it, and it allows us a shared mental model that we can use across all of our fleets and all of our operations that is going to make us safer. That's the key to this. Now, we won't go into the very detail of the SOP itself. We'll talk about a couple things here, but what I want you to know is that it's designed for direct adoption into your flight departments, or you can adopt it in a modular manner. Because many of you have your publications to support your safety management programs, and you can take components of this one for one and adopt it in there, so it's designed in a modular format for you. What we tried to focus on here is, number one, is the crew coordination from before you move the aircraft, from the ramp to that surface movement procedures to your entire flight operation, the communication, the crew responsibilities, that's all taken care of with the crew coordination. A major focus area of our efforts was actually the briefing to include that FAA-BACE, the PAVE, before we leave. We've got a couple of acronyms to help facilitate it, not force the acronym use, but help facilitate the fact that we need to provide excellent, proper, standard briefing to include threat and error management. And so we've adopted an industry standard of threats, plans, and considerations to be able to add that to our briefings. And probably the most important piece is an emphasis on debriefing that us as training providers will make sure we enforce, and that we see a lot of flight departments don't necessarily take that time to do so, but we have an emphasis in the SOP of that debriefing. It supports your SMS program. So if you have to file any reports, it has you look at your operating procedures, any safety exceedances, areas of improvement, the triumphs for your flight. So those things are detailed in there. And then I would say that the last piece structurally for the document talks about flight path management. And what I mean by that is the FAA spent a lot of time with a lot of really brilliant people working on AC 120, 123, which is the Flight Path Management Advisory Circular. And the principles in that circular are critical to the success of all of our flight operations. This is going to help integrate that into our training programs and into your flight operations through the use of the Common SOP. One of the things that these gentlemen pointed out is that if you develop this, we need something that's easy access, right? As far as the call-outs, we go through in this manual and we talk about call-outs in various phases, but there's an appendix that's included, which is the consolidated version of those call-outs, so that it's really easy for any flight department to take them. You can adopt them. It's easier for the crews to consume, and then it's easy for our instructors to be able to learn and then exercise those with you guys. So taking that runway safety concept, that 2025 NBAA top safety focus areas of runway safety, let's just drill down a little bit on here. So the NBAA is correct in stating that runway excursions, they happen to be still the major contributor to accidents in business aviation. Just in 2025, if you look at our business aviation or business jets, I should say, under 100,000 pounds MTOW, we've already had 30 excursions just this year alone. Most of those excursions occurred on an average runway length of about 6,000 feet. So these accidents that I'm showing you here were the business aviation accidents that just occurred in the last month. The airlines also had their share of runway excursions in the last month as well. Now, runway excursions occur for a multitude of reasons, and I would not presume to get ahead of the NTSB final report for determining if SOP was a causal factor for these images that you see here. But I will tell you that we took an effort to look at the last 50 final reports from the NTSB for runway excursions, and a full 60% of those reference the causal factor being SOP adherence. So there is an impact to what we do. So how does the SOP help us? Well, one of the components of the SOP deals with that runway safety component, and it breaks it down into three focal areas. One is a stabilized approach, safe landing, and then a commitment to stop. The ACTARC recently put up a recommendation with respect to stabilized approaches. And what they did is they worked with the FAA to look at an extensive amount of data. And what that data shows is that more than 90% of the arrivals actually meet stabilized approach criteria, okay? They meet it, no problems. But there is that roughly 10% of unstable approaches that do occur out there, and only about 0.5% of those unstable approaches actually executed a go-around after not meeting their criteria as they were supposed to. So if 99.5% of the time, professional pilots don't follow the guidance associated out there in our operations, it's time to relook at the way that that guidance is ported, right? So what we say is a stabilized approach policy is critical. Stabilized approach requirements are in rule. It is in the airman certification standards that's now been incorporated by reference into rule, but it doesn't narrow it down to thou shalt go around if you don't meet these X parameters at 1,000 feet or 500 feet. So the change is that we have the stabilized approach as consideration gates, okay? It's for to consider a go around, and we provide guidance on how we communicate with one another in that stabilized approach environment. But the change also is the addition of a safe landing where that go around is mandatory. Because in that zone between 200 feet and a commitment to stop, to stop being defined by all wheels on the ground, brakes applied, drag devices deployed if you have them. That zone there, we don't have the seconds for indecision and conversation about should we or should we not. So there's the stabilized approach consideration, and there's mandates if you're not within the lateral and longitudinal limits of that safe to landing zone. Now, how are we helping this? Well, one thing that the industry, has introduced, has been adopted into the SOP is calculation of a latest touchdown point, okay? And that latest touchdown point has to be visually confirmed on the runway surface that we're landing on. How do we calculate that? Well, we take the landing distance available, you subtract the adjusted landing distance. You guys know this, right? It's slope, it's wind, it's contamination, those kind of things for your adjusted landing distance. We're not talking about that performance assessment you would have done for dispatch. That's in here too, as far as that calculation before arrival. But bringing in this concept of an adjusted landing distance, and we add the 1,000 feet, because what we're doing is we're calculating what is the point that I touch down, that ground portion of my adjusted landing distance is all I have left on that runway. And so we found that that has been really highly accepted by a lot of your operations, and it's part of this document. The last thing on here is commitment to stop. Once you've committed to stop, commit to stop. The instances that I showed you before, they actually took advantage of the EMAS in some of those areas where there wasn't a lot of room between the end of the runway and the highway. But we've had other instances where there was an indecision. Once the commitment to stop was executed, they decided against the commitment to stop, and the outcome was not as safe. So finally, we as training providers, we have a few thousand instructors, and for us, change management is hard. We know change is hard, right? But we're committed to making that change. We're committed to holding ourselves accountable to the standard, to the SOP, and we're committed to holding your flight crews accountable to the standards. And I think that together, we can make the industry safer. Thanks. Thanks, Franks.
We're going to move into a panel discussion from here. I want to engage the rest of the group here on, all right, so we have these SOPs. Now what, essentially, is the question I think that's probably on everyone's mind. We've talked a little bit about what's in them, but can you start maybe here on the end, Brian? You've got a microphone beside you here. Now what? You've got the SOP. Are these guys going to see it at the training center? And who? It should be on. Just, yep. These guys will unmute it over here if you just go ahead and start talking.
Okay, thanks. Good question. So as I said, change management is hard. I think like Tim and I have talked about the fact that now that you have something that we've come to a common understanding with, we have to begin the process of developing our courseware and documentation for that, which we have done so. That has to be submitted to oversight, FAA oversight. So for 142 providers like Tim and I, everything that we put in front of you has to be approved by the FAA, and we have to demonstrate how we're going to implement that. So what we've said is we have to get through that process of actually the approval with the FAA, which we've begun, and then it's the process of actual change management throughout our organizations. CAE has centers across the world, as does FlightSafety, and then coordinating the time that eyeball to eyeball with our instructors who are lots of generations and lots of experience to try to kind of move that needle forward. That's going to take us a little bit. So you'll begin to see pockets of this as we move forward with some of the training initiatives that both organizations are working on. But certainly we're of the feeling that summer of 26, we'll be able to have a greater facility for the implementation in.
I guess I'll just add internationally as well. You have to be pragmatic with this type of change. It literally is thousands of instructors in many different locations, not just FAA training. This would be applicable to everything that we do. And similarly, we have over, I think, 15 different National Aviation Authority approvals. So this will just become the new vocabulary, the new language that's spoken among instructors. So that includes in the change management process, risk assessment, and ensuring that we're going to deploy this in a sustainable way and then reinforce it and ensure that we're also following up to I guess, get some analytics as well, and as far as adoption is concerned. But it's one thing on our side from an adoption standpoint, but it's also on your side. So we're quite keen to, that's why the other panelists are here as well, is to talk a little bit about the industry adoption for such an initiative.
I couldn't have teed it up any better. So I know these guys are chomping at the bit. These guys are really excited to chime in here too. Tom, you want to tell us a little bit about where does your organization go from here? We've got this document. Now what for you guys?
So first it'll be the implementation in the manuals. We got to get it out to everybody, and then we got to train it. And obviously, if you're a smaller operation, it's a little easier than if it's a large operation. We have 550 plus full-time pilots, plus another, call it 600 contract pilots, or what we call part-time pilots, because we don't really do the contract pilot thing. And getting that word out, and then training it, and then once you train it, is the follow-up. And the follow-up is probably the biggest issue we have, at least from my perspective. And it's actually the Achilles heel of a lot of things that we do, at least at Solairus, because there are dedicated personnel to each account. And there's not, Tom Benvenuto or Dondi there overseeing these folks and making sure that they're adhering to the new SOP. And I hate to say it, but corporate aviation, business aviation, private, whatever, however you want to coin the term.
Business aviation.
Thank you. Thank you. Business aviation, the standardization in our industry, our corner of aviation, is really horrid, in my opinion. Now, the folks in this room might be doing an excellent job because you're here, right? You care. You wouldn't be here if you didn't care. However, there are some folks out there that are not standardized, and or they like to make stuff up. I actually use another word, but I'd get in trouble if I use that word. And that is the biggest challenge. One of the biggest challenges for us is getting everybody on board on the same flight plan. And I kind of equate it to being a musician, where, and I'm not saying you're a jamming musician. I'm talking about a musician who reads music, and you show up with a bunch of bandmates, and you're going to play music. And if you're not on the same sheet of music, it sounds terrible. And obviously, it sounds terrible in the airplane, but it's also super dangerous, as we've sort of demonstrated here.
And so Dondi is actually chairing the training subcommittee in NBAA's Domestic Operations Committee. They've been a huge part of reviewing this and making sure it works for a variety of different operator sizes and operational profiles. Dondi, what does this mean for you guys over at Clay Lacy?
Well, just like Tom and Toby, we are 3 of the 4 largest operators of our kind, right? And we have mixed fleets that basically, if you put the 4 of us together, we've got 300, roughly 1,000 airplanes plus pilots going on it. And to your graphic, only 1/3 of my fleet is 135. So we have 160 flight departments under one flight department. So if we're talking about implementation, it has to be thorough, right, thoroughly thought out. Use our change management systems, obviously. But the thing is that we've been creating this culture. And I know these 2 guys on either side of me have been doing this for a long time too. That's why we constantly compete for the same business throughout the industry. But if we didn't have that, for example, then we can't control all 160 flight departments under the one flight department. The other part is, you talked about earlier, is supplemental airlift, right? Not all of us have the capacity to serve all of our customers all the time. So if Toby says, hey, Dondi, I need a G5 to go from here to here, and I'm like, okay, yeah, we can do that for you. The standardized SOPs allows us to maintain brand integrity for us, as well as protecting our certificate. So for us, it's just part of the change management system, and understanding that. And that's why let me go back to the training working group. The training working group has single pilot, single airplane operators to those who are multiple airplanes, multiple fleet types, and that size. So when we looked at this through that lens, and again, we're looking at it as a national lens, and I think it's one of the things that we are lucky about being NBAA, is that we can see things at a national lens, and it's important we hear your voices so that we can now coalesce that into a national lens and make it something that's viable and sustainable for the future. So I know that's not quite the question you asked, but the big thing for me is that with all the different hats that I wear, especially one that hopefully next year I'll be able to brief something even more exciting. But the standard operating procedure that we're doing today will lend itself, for those of you who are 135 operators, you'll see some changes in 299 line checks that we haven't seen since 1978. So this is kind of the foundation of that, and that foundation is critical to safety margins and how we move together. And when he says, I need a G5 with a crew that's going to train and operate the way I do, he has a high level of fidelity that he's not going to have a problem with his brand or his certificate.
Toby, do you have anything to add to what these guys have said?
Yeah, absolutely. I think number one, I think we all recognize how big this momentum that we have here and the opportunity. And I look down at the other end of the panel here and I look at the training aspect of this and the accountability that the training provider and the instructors, it's critical. We think of what we're doing today. Just out of show of hands, how many pilots do we have in here? How many of you have also trained in a simulator with someone not in your own department? So what I believe Tom was alluding to earlier, how did that go for that first sim? How long did it take to figure each other out? And it depends. It absolutely does. I can remember one event. It was, I was in the right seat, and it almost felt like I was in a new type rating because of how they wanted to conduct the operation. I just felt totally out of the loop, and that is not a situation that we ever want to be in. So that training aspect of it and having the instructors hold the crew members going through and having that accountability is going to be key, as well as what we has already talked about, the manuals, the internal training. We're talking about using our SMS, and we've kind of already trying to get ahead of this and planning, and we're talking about kind of a three-phase implementation with this. We're going to provide the information out to all of our crew members, let them do the preview of this, let them ask some questions. We're going to provide some, like a gap document from what our SOPs are today to the changes that we are going to see in this new document. Then we'll go through a practical application of it. We're going to ask them to start using it out in the real world. And then later, that phase 3 will be that full implementation, probably to coincide with when FlightSafety and CA are ready to deliver that. So again, it's exciting times, and I think the panel here, it's very unique that we're all on the same page here.
There's one other thing I left out, or we left out, and that is for the 135 side of the operation, there's an approval process that you have to go through your local FSDO. But changing SOP depends on your POI. Hopefully there's no POIs in here. That can sometimes be an arduous
They're not
journey.
working
Other
right now,
times,
so they're not here. You're safe.
yeah, right. That's right. But that's not usually as big a deal. I mean, it's like we were talking about here. It's the implementation. Vetting it out, getting folks on board, getting people to soak it up, and then providing the oversight to get them to actually use it every day, day in and day out, and then it becoming habitual. Because again, like I said, a lot of folks out there are running around with their bag of tricks, and every time they get into an airplane, they open up that bag and they just keep pulling out their bag of tricks. See it all the time. It's an unfortunate thing, but it happens all the time.
Yeah, and I think you guys really kind of hit on what we wanted to emphasize here is that moving forward, when you go to the simulator, these will be the SOPs that are provided, no matter which training facility you use, no matter whether you're Part 91 or Part 135, whether you fly for these guys full-time or part-time, you will use them in the simulator. And the goal is that you would also use them in the airplane, fly the way you train the way you fly. And so at least at these three organizations, you will use them in the airplane. 91 or 135, doesn't matter what type, doesn't matter fixed wing, it does matter fixed wing or rotor wing, but it doesn't matter single pilot or multi-pilot, single engine or multi-engine. This will be the way you fly, and that kind of consistency is really going to do a lot to drive safety. And so we're really excited about that. I think we've hit on that. We've touched on what that means for the industry. The other thing we haven't talked a lot about amongst ourselves yet is what that means for data. Does someone want to jump in and talk about how that's going to impact safety data moving forward? Brian, I see you looking at me nodding. You want to kick off that part of the conversation?
Sure. I think that someone said to me one time, data is the new oil. And I think that's certainly true. The problem is you can have, I think what Lou said to me, you guys have oceans and oceans of data. So I think both organizations from the different service providers that we work with and our own internal data, we have a credible amount of information that's presented to us. And it's important to kind of be able to understand what that data says and then what we can do with it. So I know that at FlightSafety, as you saw on some of the statistics, we're really trying to look at not only information that comes out of training and checking to be able to help decide where our focus areas need to be. There's a concept of how much you emphasize particular tasks or competencies versus others based on that data, which, just a few years ago, we weren't having the same level of confidence or ability to kind of make that distinction between what we're seeing and documenting. So I think that's critical. Certainly the devices themselves being able to demonstrate very clearly pilot performance, that wasn't available to us until fairly recently. A lot of great work on biometrics and eye tracking and things like that kind of come in that you'll see as we move forward into that data collection. So we really feel that the efforts that the training providers will be able to see, especially in pilot competency or crew competency, and being able to change the needle on that, to change our training, to standardize how we talk to you about it, and then certainly data share. It's one of the top 25 things that the 2025 safety focus areas of NBAA is that safety data sharing, and I think that's sort of really critical to the success of industry.
Go ahead, Tim.
No, I nailed it. I think it's the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step, and data can be used. It can also feel a little bit overwhelming to FOQA and simulator data. It can be a bit overwhelming. So this to me is a fundamental step.
Maybe you could try Brian's mic.
Here, let's try it. Okay. Thank you. To me, this is a fundamental step that we have to take, which is a stepping stone, which is to just train our instructors. I worked at an air carrier internationally, and they went from a task-based training organization, to evidence-based training. And it really started with the instructors. So getting that solid understanding for the instructors first, part of that change management plan. And then really it was in the last mile when you actually informed the pilots that this was going to be the transition. So data is fantastic, but I do think there's some fundamentals that we need to put in place. And for me, this is the first of the major fundamentals. And where you have transcendence across training providers, where we really are the airline of your operation, to have this common SOPs is a huge fundamental step for the industry.
Do any of the three of you on the end have anything to add on this topic, or maybe how it'll impact your SMS and the way you gather?
Well, I always do. So first of all, I want to thank everybody who participated in this, because there's a lot of precedents that this group and the other groups, some other groups that I'm working on, we haven't seen. And I've been fighting this campaign, this battle, this fight, whatever you want to call it, for nearly 30 years, right? And to now see both training departments and four of the largest, management groups / charter groups come to the table with the smaller ones. This is really unprecedented. This type of collection of the brain trust that what it is here. You guys coming in here and giving us your feedback, your thoughts. This is the first time that I'm looking at the light at the end of the tunnel. It's not a locomotive barreling down on me, especially even with the FAA. The FAA has given us a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? Latitude to help us improve, because we know what we're doing. And I don't know if you guys know him or not, but Rob Reckert, who's now AVS 1 or 2?
AFX1.
So I've known Rob for a few years, former helicopter guy like me, so we hit it off right away, obviously. But he said, Dondi, if you can give me the scissors to run down the hall with, we will get it done. And that's exactly what this is about, is we've taken it, they've given us the ability to do this. And again, how many times have you heard the FAA say, oh, no, we got this. This is our bailiwick. You know, we got this under control. Well, they don't, because they're having the same problems that we're having. If a guy has a medical, he's going back to flying. There are regions of the United States right now that do not have POIs, and we're constantly having to battle with that. So now, how do you get your training plan approved? How do you get your SOP accepted? There's delays, right? And so that doesn't help the industry. So when they come to us and they ask us for their help, and it's actually genuine, and you get the group that you have up here making that change happen, again, I get goosebumps every time I talk about it. And I can't wait till next base if I get to talk about other things that we're working on that will take this to the next step. You guys are going to see some changes, again, that have not occurred since the preamble. The 135 was written in 1978, and it's major stuff that's happening coming down the road. So, again, I want to thank everybody who participated in this, because, again, luckily I've known these guys for a very long time, and others who participated in other working groups with me. But it's the first time that we've really been able to do this as a coalesced industry. And for those of you who've been around this long enough, you should be excited about that, because the FAA, and now under the Section 336 of the reauthorization plan, is giving us a lot of ability to create the change that is going to increase safety margins across the board. And again, it's hard for me to not jump into what I'd like to be able to talk about, but hopefully next year we'll be able to talk about that.
Such a teaser.
I know.
You've talked a lot about the future and the changes that are coming, and so maybe we can talk a little bit about the changes that may be coming to this document and this project. You can see that that's been top of mind for us, is that this will be evolving. We've already got the QR code on here to provide feedback. I'm sure some of you have already looked at this. I'm sure you all have your own thoughts on the way the callouts are phrased and the way they're ordered and that sort of thing. If you have thoughts, please go ahead and start submitting them. Dondi, you're leading the NBAA training subcommittee. Do you want to touch a little bit on the process from your perspective on how that'll work?
Well, sure. So again, we've been talking about this now for, 3 years, and I know that I was part of the standardized curriculum at a different company, and then got punted off, and then got back onto it when I came here. So and David Keys is critical of that, right? So getting the people on the committee, and if you're not on any of these NBAA committees and you're just going to be a typical pilot and sport bitch, then I would encourage you to get on a committee and
Careful, this is recorded.
Come play with us, okay? I know. Because that's what I've been hearing since 1997 when I first left the military, came in here, went to another brand X, and people love to be Captain Obvious and state, well, we should be doing this. Well, can you help us? No, I didn't say I was going to help. I just think we should be doing it that way. Oh, well, thank you for very little for that. So what's been really cool about this subgroup for the training committee is that, again, we have small operators and large operators on there, and we're looking at ways to really coalesce the entire industry and use your ideas, use your energy, use the resources that just aren't this group up here. And we meet, I think it's once, it's the third Thursday or Wednesday of every month, or not every 2 months now. But we bring up all the things from, why can't we do 121 AQP like training, right? Why does everybody, it's the gold standard, right? We've been told, and I've seen it in implementation. I was at FlightSafety when NetJets in 2012 went from 135 to 121 NNO, and now they're full AQP, right? So it it can happen, but we all have to want it to happen, and we can't just sit back and go, oh, that's okay, that's great, but it's not my responsibility. So I would encourage all of you, if you feel that strongly about it, then have your voice heard. Come out and participate. I know Ben's over there down his head because I think he and I have a tendency to monopolize the conversation when we're in the middle of a working group. But we're very passionate about it. We've been doing this for a long time. I've been in flight safety. I've worked at CAE as well, and I've been an operator most of my life. So being part of the working group and that committee, I encourage you guys to seek us out if you can. We've got a wide variety of operators from single engine pistons all the way up to the largest business jet and BBJs today. And that group is all very passionate and excited about increasing safety margins through training. We all believe that training, at least I do, I'll speak to anyone else, but I believe that training is the foundation to safety, and this SOP allows us a higher fidelity to grab the data that we need to move us forward, right? And then we can go from there. And again, Tom said it best. We never do the feedback loop. We never finish the job. If you look at, I'm going to steal flight safety's decision matrix right now, right? Everybody knows that if there's time available, right, we do the full measure of the circle. And if we push that button and did we get the desired effect? Yes or no. It's that simple, okay? But a lot of times when we implement things like this, change management, we go, okay, well, this is a great idea. We put the SOP out there. We train it. We let it digest. We do it. But do we measure? Did it get the intended effect that we wanted? I can guarantee you most of the answer is no. Because even at my organization, when we put things into place, we forget that feedback loop.
And that's where the stronger data will come in.
Right.
And
right. So that's...
want to turn it over here to the training centers to see if they have anything to add on the change management process from their perspective moving forward.
Yeah, and I'll just add to what Dondi was saying in regards to the, I guess, the look back at how we're going to manage this. So the information should come in, right? If you have different comments, different feedback, it should continuously come in, and this will be archived for a period of 12 months. What we didn't want to do was to have a cycle of retraining instructors too frequently, because they'd be like, I don't even know what SOP I'm supposed to be following anymore. So we wanted to keep it stable, have at least 12 months worth of information, collect your feedback, and then have an actual stewarded event where NBAA stewards this event, probably through the training committee, and have the large 142s be there, other operators, other carriers, to give us that feedback. And then we'll make a change, and then we'll revise it. And that's part of that continuous feedback loop. So specifically, practically speaking, that's, I think, how we're going to improve this. It'll be stewarded by NBAA. It'll be driven by the training providers. And through your feedback, we will evolve this into the future.
And of course, you guys have feedback mechanisms as well. Pass that along to the group so we can all be looking at the same feedback at the same time. And so that'll be helpful to address this. We do want to take a minute here to open it up to you folks. Some of you looking at me quizzically, like, what are we talking about? So if you guys have questions, we do want to save time and answer those to the best of our ability. If anyone has any questions. Looks like we've got one up front and then one in the back.
So I'm sure that anybody who's been in here for the rest of these safety things are done hearing me talk. So I work for a startup 135 operator, and from everything that I have found, and I have ripped apart just about every manual we don't have any current SOPs. We had previously bought a defunct company to absorb their certificate, and I have been kind of left in the lurch with how to go about handling some of these things. So thank you so much for developing a standardized SOP that I can start off with, because as much as I love my director of operations, I'm sure that he does not have the time to work with me on those. What have you guys found to be the best starting place? Like, who have you spoken with when you started developing the standardized SOP and have adapted them to your guys' programs?
You want from an operator perspective?
Please.
It's a really good question in the sense that I forgot. It's been so damn long. But I will tell you this. When I first started the company in Solairus, Solairus was a little company. It was called Sunset Aviation. It was in North Bay, California, little charter company. And when I first got there, I had just got furloughed from United. And I was like shocked by how they were operating. And across the board, the training, in-doc, like my in-doc was 3 hours long with a friend of mine who said, oh, you know this. And I'm like, no, I don't know I don't even know what a citation looks like. So over the course of time, I used NBAA stuff that, they had published, this is like early 2000. I stole my United stuff. And granted, we're talking 777s and 747s and 737s, and it wasn't always totally applicable to the type of King Airs, right? But it provided the foundation. And then over the years, we just built on that. And I think the other thing you need to do is you got to get how when SMS came out, and everybody was like, oh, what's this safety management stuff? Like, this is baloney. I operate the airplane safe. I don't need somebody telling me I'm not safe. So you have to get the buy-in. And the buy-in is, first of all, like this guy here who's very passionate, you can tell, it's being able to project that energy to your group to get them to understand, guys, this is why we're doing this. And if you use accidents to sort of solidify the concept, that's very powerful. In fact, I think we had a few, I'm kind of go off on a little tangent here, but I think the slide thing about what happens when you have weak SOP, we had a few years back, one of our trainers put together this slide deck about, Wyvern standard, Argus standard, and all these audits, and we operate really, really safe. And then he had 5 or 6 slides of airplane accidents, and they were all these certified Argus this and Wyvern this, and nothing against those because they're good standards, is Bail this, and they were all involved in accidents. So what is that? Does that mean that it's just they got an SMS manual, they got a program in place, and it's just sitting on the shelf collecting dust? Or are they truly breathing, living, doing? And I think, again, going back to if you're developing, this is, like I wish somebody had given me this when I started out as a chief pilot DO, because I didn't know what I was doing and I had to rely on my experience. And I think if you've got that and you've got this, you're miles ahead of where we were probably 20, 30, however long we've been in the industry.
Toby, you're giving a sly smile there. You want to add?
I liked your comment about it's been so long since I kind of forgot. It's a lot of us, I think, have just kind of adopted the training center SOPs. If you dig way in the back of the training program manual, there's some profiles and they got some call outs that are very structured similar to what we worked on here. And I think a lot of us just adopted that. But to our knowledge, I mean, at least from my standpoint, we don't sit there and go over each single line to understand why. And I think some of the stuff that was left out of what Brian was talking about earlier about the whole preface of this new manual gives you the whole background of that as to the why we are doing it this way. The other thing that I want to comment is none of this effort is going to be worth anything unless we all participate in this. It takes the group. And I think you look back at every session that you sat in over the past couple of days, focused on that safety aspect of it. And, we have industry experts up here that have taken the time to kind of create this unified industry SOP using the industry best practices. But it takes all of us. There are going to be some disagreements. There were some disagreements when we were developing this. So there's going to have to be a little bit of compromise there as well, and understanding. And if you are passionate enough, and I know Dondi used another word on that, but get involved. Don't just sit back. This isn't going to work if you're just going to say, hey, I'm not going to do that. These guys don't know what they're talking about. I know how to do it better. Get involved. If you have a better way, I'm open to hearing it. I mean, I think we all would be. So get involved in the committees, be vocal about it, but be willing to put in the work as well to help create the solution.
All right, we're going to cut off answers there, so we don't have time for Dondi to weigh in and take another question. Let's go to the back.
I'm curious about the future of it. So we go to version 2, and I remember every time we ever had a new version in a manual, it changed maybe 3 words, and call-outs, pilots would throw an uproar, right? So how do we make that agreement that, we're following these SOPs, someone else is following these SOPs, like the secret handshake, that we're all agreeing that we're going to join this program, and then how are we going to get those future revisions?
Great question. So this is a voluntary standard, something I wanted to throw out there. Do one of you guys want to jump in here? Dondi, you're always happy to
Okay, well, I thought I was cut off. So I thought, is this still working? So to your point, right? Well, first of all, this is, so we'll go back to the Wyvern, Argus, the ISBAO audits and the standards. So say you fly a Gulfstream 5 and you want to be an supplemental airlift provider for Clay Lacy. Well, you can go and be Wyvern wingman, everything else, but if you aren't playing on the same page, you're not going to be in this unified SOP or whatever you want to call it. You're not trained the way we're doing it. I'm probably not going to put you on that list. Right? So, because again, I have to protect the brand and 1,000 jobs, right? So, but when you get to the next phases of the, what's the next thing? As Brian said, said earlier, this is a living document. This is we'll call it a draft right now. It's our first iteration, right? And you need to give us feedback, right? And we're gonna go and probably review this. Not on a very onerous basis, but we're going to review this on some type of cadence that, and it will be, the repository will be NBAA, right? All the input will come through NBAA, and we'll do it in a structured change management format, and we'll look at the revision, whatever. Again, we haven't figured out a cadence yet. We just finished this, right? So, Brian, you want to talk to that?
Sure. So just like Tim was saying earlier, I think what we've come to is that annual cycle is really important, and for training providers, because we have the same change management issues, right? We have to adopt the change. And then for us, not only do we have to adopt the change, we have to change our product. So NBAA has a standardized curriculum, our standardized operating procedures manual, right? And then FlightSafety develops the standardized operating procedures manual with FlightSafety's logo, adopting all the information, perhaps some additional information that has to cycle through FAA oversight. Same thing with CAE and Tim's organization. So we have to have that cadence where NBAA's committees, they're the ones that are reviewing this, that will always be up, will always have that intake of information. These guys are looking at it. Certainly if something comes up as they look through these things throughout the year that's considered a safety of flight issue, that gets elevated, right? We'll make that change. But for us, we have to have that cadence where it's going to come to us. We as a training provider will work with NBAA and the committees to be able to affect that change into our publications. And then obviously we have to go through that internal process of notification, just as you guys would for your pilots. So if it's, we always say that our FAA oversight's like the comma police when we have courseware, so it's not about the comma police, right? So it's about substantive change. So obviously when there's substantive change, then that's where we have a lot more of this type of effort in working with NBAA to be able to support you guys. And like I said in the beginning when I was talking, this organization provides the access and the awareness, right? So it's the access and the awareness campaigns that NBAA is going to support, that it's going to help facilitate that change management and keep this on pace.
I think part of the reason we're here is we want to get in front of this. We want to tell people that this is a good thing. It is a voluntary program. People don't have to use this, but to the point of your question, it's going to be a grassroots effort. Encourage your colleagues on the airfield to adopt this. Let them know this is coming. Change is coming. Change is hard. Has been a phrase that we throw around a lot. Everyone wants change. No one wants to change. But this will only work if it's supported by the community. It's developed by the community, but the community needs to adopt it. And that's going to start with you guys. Clearly, you're all excited about this, committed to this. It's 5 o'clock in Las Vegas on day 2 of the NBA convention, and they're serving drinks down on the show floor, but you're here learning about this. So I think that really speaks to the commitment of the people in this room. And it really is going to take the people in this room to help spread the word about this. Coming up on the end here, I mean, the work that these guys have put in, you've seen the passion and the enthusiasm on this stage, and multiply that by 30 or 45 other people who have also been involved in it. You clearly see why it's taken 10 years. And then you throw in some government folks on top of that and some government hurdles, and we've had to course correct along the way in order to get here. But it really is exciting. This is a years-long, decade-long culmination of effort from the largest to the smallest, 135, 91 operators. We've had regulators involved. We've had manufacturers involved. We've had the training centers involved. We've had NBAA. We had NATA involved. The whole community has come together on this. The industry-wide standard will lead to improved safety if it is adopted and implemented. We'll have better standardization. We'll have implementation and adoption of best practices. And then we'll have stronger data, which will allow us to continue to evolve and become even safer yet. And the point is, to your point, that this is Rev 1. There will continue to be changes. We will continue to communicate with you. We are excited for what's coming in summer of 2026. We see that you guys are clearly excited as well. Stay tuned for more announcements on this. Thank you for being here, and enjoy NBAA 2025. Thank you.